The Riverkeeper was approached about 6 months ago by an organization called South Wing. And South Wing is made up of pilots and aircraft, and they make their services available to organizations that require high altitude visibility for their watershed. And riverkeepers look at their watershed, and to be able, since watersheds are large and rivers are long, it's very hard to see the details of the river. So what South Wing has done for us is to provide us this resource, and so we decided to take advantage of it. Personally, I have been the entire length of the river numerous times by boat and by car, although you don't see much by car, but by boat you get to see the whole thing. And it's a beautiful, beautiful river, one that deserves to be seen by everyone. Unfortunately, not everyone has the opportunity to see the entire river. So what this flyby offered by South Wing did for us was to give us the opportunity to show off this beautiful river to the public and organizations who have not had the opportunity to see it. As we all know, the Okefenokee Swamp is the headwaters of the river. It's the source of the St. Mary's River. And of course, the St. Mary's flows for about 140 miles to the ocean. And the mouth of the river is between Amelia Island to its south and Cumberland Island to its north. So we decided, since we were in Fernandine already, is to take the westerly trip and fly up and follow the St. Mary's River all the way up to its origins. Now keep in mind, the mouth of the river is very large. The source of the river, you can almost walk across and not get your knees wet. So it's a very thin river as we get closer to its sources, and it gets much more difficult to see because of the river lined with tupelos and water oak and cedar and all of the different beautiful trees that line the river all the way up to the Okefenokee Swamp. So our challenge was to be able to see the river all the way up. It's interesting to note that the river itself is about 140 miles long, but the source of the river, the Okefenokee Swamp, is only about 50 miles from the ocean. So by way of the crow flies, it's 50 miles. By way of the river flowing, it's 140 miles. Our mission, among other things, is to educate the public about the sensitivities of the river and the resources of the river. And what we were able to find with the river is, compared to, say, the St. Johns River, we're a very high quality river. Very little commercial or industrial or even land development on the river. Probably 90% of the coastlines on either side of the river are timber farms, which are owned by private individuals and corporations. And consequently, the river has been well taken care of by these timber interests, and we're very fortunate to have them as stewards of the river. The St. Mary's Riverkeeper really view our responsibility of preserving the river the way it is. We don't have too many battles to fight in terms of polluters and contaminants in the river, but we do want to conserve it and preserve it just as it is for our children and for the children to come. The river typically has been, in fact, it has a very wide and long history. It was used back in the day when lumber was a big industry here, and sailing ships from Europe would come into the St. Mary's River to the lumber yards and collect lumber and take their produce back over to Europe. It was really a river that notices history back into the 1500s with the local Tamaquen Indians and the French that came into the area, and the British and Spanish, and used the boundary line of the St. Mary's River as a kind of a separation between the Florida Spanish and the British in Georgia and to the north. So there's a lot of trade, and it also saw its military action in the War of 1812 and the Civil War, as well as the Revolutionary War. A lot of history. The river today is designated as a recreational river, which means that it is suitable for swimming as well as fishing and eating the fish from the river. Some rivers are designated as water sources. Our river is not clean enough to be a water source, but it is designated for recreation, and that's important because the designation is what we want to protect. We want to protect it as a swimmable river and as a fishable river, and we'd like to think a drinkable river when the procedures are put in place if we need to have that water for drinkable and potable water. So really what we're in the business to do is to protect the designated use of that river as a recreational fishing and swimming and water sport river. And it continues to be that to this day. You can fly up and down the river from the estuary up into the smaller stretches of the river, up into McClenny and Folkestone and that area. And you will see fishermen continuing to fish the rivers, both for freshwater and saltwater fish. So it continues to be a river that is living up to its designation as a recreational river. Now notice I did not say that this river was a pristine river. We have issues related to the river. In fact, the United States EPA has determined the river to be impaired for a couple of different reasons. The primary reason is fecal coliform. Fecal coliform is bacteria that originates from human waste. The human waste originates from poorly maintained septic systems up and down the river. So when we get storms and rain events, the septage from these poorly maintained septic systems washes into the river, making the river impaired for fishing and swimming. So our primary objective right now is to clean up the river, and we have a number of ways to do that. We now have a grant in Browntown or Camden County that will allow us to clean up 30 septic systems, and we expect similar kinds of projects to be going on upriver. But why is that so important? You know, this area is considered to be one of the most productive habitats for oysters, and we have oysters throughout our estuary that grow wild and are there living in this perfect habitat. Problem is, we cannot harvest them and allow them to be consumable by the public because of the bacteria. The bacteria in the water, which is E. coli, and in the salt water, it's called Enterococcus. That bacteria comes from human waste, poisons the oysters, and prohibits them from qualifying as a consumable shellfish. So part of what we're trying to do is to reduce the amount of human waste in the water, in the river and its estuaries, and allow our estuaries to clean up and promote the harvesting of the oysters. We have upriver some mercury that's found in fish tissue. That mercury generally comes out of the air from coal-fired power plants west of our river. That mercury will fall into the river and it will dissolve into the habitat and be consumed by the fish, which is what drives that mercury into fish tissue. That needs to be cleaned up, although there's very little we can do about that other than to keep pushing for the cleanup of the coal-fired power plants west of us. As a riverkeeper, that's our primary responsibility, to educate people to the quality of the water and the resource that we have here and how it needs to be protected and what we need to protect and what are the threats to the river, and what do we need to do about that. We certainly hope that what you've seen today has been an educational experience for you. That really was its intended purpose. We hope that it encourages you to perhaps explore the river a little bit more. And if anybody is interested in doing that, I have ways that you can do that and would be glad to help out. But I also hope that it encourages you to support the efforts of the Riverkeeper to keep this river high quality, to clean it up even more, to preserve it and conserve it for our future children, and to make it a food source again as it was 50, 60 years ago when we had a very productive oyster habitat. So we need your help, and anything that you can do to help would be greatly appreciated.